right, good. We should get started.
Okay, good. The first thing was actually, I wanted to follow up on that thing we were talking about before, the level of difficulty in the main branches that we have, or traditions that we have: Buddhism, then Sufism, then Taoism, in order of difficulty. Are those the three main ones we have that people go to?
Yes, uh, but we're leaving out Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a big one. Uh, so, in terms of difficulty, I was speaking in terms of difficulty in terms of embodying the way, embodying the Sufi path, and embodying the Buddhist path. I would say that the Taoist way is the most demanding, but it's also the most simple, and it's also the one that you end up there anyway. Uh, uh, Spiritual evolution, or just adult maturation, when very, very successful, ends up looking something like a Taoist master, you know, a sage. But it was just like small talk, small Dharma talk. I think that there are ways that you could turn the whole thing over and say that the Taoism is easiest and the Buddhism is most difficult. You know, so it's really just a silly kind of small talk.
Okay,
If fruition of any of those paths is fruition of any of those, every one of those paths.
great. Good morning, Rabbit. Hi, nice to see you.
Morning,
I hope I gave
Rabbit.
you the speaker privileges.
Oh, good morning, everybody. Happy Sunday.
Thank you.
You too. Okay, so why don't we get started talking more in depth about the 6 Buddhist paramitas? We've given them some lip service, but I was hoping that we could get into them a little bit more nuanced. And then the things I'm hoping to speak about for each of them are 3 or 4 categories: purposes, common obstacles, and then practices and contemplations. So in order, as just a reiteration, we have generosity, then patience, then effort, then discipline, insight, and meditation, which obviously have more connotations and definitions to them. Do you want to tackle those one by one or overall at first?
Well, let's take overall at first, because I want to point out something that's not obvious. At least it wasn't obvious to me, uh, in 30 years, and now it's very obvious. And that is well, it was obvious, but it was the importance of it wasn't obvious. So what our forefathers have done here is they've isolated out those psychological factors, those elements of what we would call someone's temperament or personality, those virtues, if you would. Uh, but that's not how they use the word. There's no moral valence to it. And these are those characteristics in the human which can be cultivated, by which I mean it's like going to the gym and working out. You can build up your biceps as big as you want. You can build up your thighs as big as you want, as long as you do squats. Well, these are features of the personality that are very, very, very useful to you and everyone around you and the world, and for your own peace of mind. And these you can cultivate. You can literally make them bigger, stronger, more reliable, and more ever present simply by doing them for over a period of time. Plus, they're great things to be doing. The second point I'd like to make in a general way is that these 6 interact with each other. So you need generosity with yourself in order to have the discipline that you're going to need in order to make the effort to, acquire the patience that you might need to do something or other, all right, in the Dharma. And so with those 2 introductory points, one is that these are developmental qualities that can be increased and enhanced and strengthened in a permanent way for humans, which is never described in Western psychology. And 2, that these things interact much in the way of a mandala, much in the way of the net of Indra, much in the same way as a almost like a hologram, where they all fit together and they all work together. So now, and they're very simple, so we can break them down to 6, and we can take them in turn, and I could say a little bit about each of those if you'd like.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Why don't we start with, just because I see this as the first one listed, and that actually might be an interesting thing to comment on, is I often see them in similar orders no matter where I go. Generosity or liberality, whichever way you call it, seems to be the first one.
Okay, well, generosity refers to generosity of spirit, generosity with material things, generosity with yourself, generosity with other people, and generosity with money. The story I like to give is back in the day, like 40 years ago. For some reason, uh, I had difficulty parting with small sums of money. You know, not I mean I could 2,000 no problem, uh, $2, and I might think about it. All right, I don't, and it's just a neurosis, right? Probably from being dirt poor as a med student and undergrad and resident. But at any rate, the Dalai Lama noted out loud that he had the same problem, and he solved it by just changing something in his mind. He just flips a switch, and that's over. Well, for me, that's a little harder because first of all, I'm not very uh, well off. I'm walking around with holes in my shoes to do grand rounds and things. But I realized that hey, this is simple. All I have to do is say I'm just going to give 20% as a tip, no matter what. So I just made that decision, and then that problem was solved for the rest of my life. Done, no problem, over. So you develop little hacks that you need, right? Maybe you have difficulty being generous with yourself. Maybe you're hard on yourself and you need to be more psychologically and emotionally generous with yourself. Well, you can do that. Generous with other people. You know, somebody's sad, somebody's down and out, somebody needs your help. Just tend towards generosity. And that word gets bigger, as all of these words do. But the thing is, it becomes easier and easier and easier. And it's pretty soon it just becomes your nature. And so that's where generosity, in a very quick thumbnail. I mean, you could literally spend an hour on each one of these or more. But what's up next?
Next, I frequently see patience or tolerance
Okay,
as the next.
patience, tolerance, and forbearance.
Yeah.
Forbearance doesn't get used enough, but tolerance, to a large extent, does refer to the forbearance. So, and forbearance, tolerance, and patience are powerful, powerful practices, and they're wonderful ways to live life because normally you'd be getting upset about something like most people would, but instead of that, you're secretly smiling because you're practicing the whole time. And so let's say you're in line at the grocery store and this sweet little old lady, you know, God bless her, you see her every Sunday and there she is and she's got her Sunday best on. And, you know, she's two people in front of you, but she pulls out her checkbook and then she's asking the guy about how to write the check, and it's almost as if she's never used a pen or a checkbook before, and she's taking 20 minutes to pay for her groceries. This is an old school example before the automatic checkouts. And so rather than getting pissed and irritated, you show some generosity towards her. I mean, she's an old lady. You're going to be an old lady someday, right? And just as an aside, Lexo, I've had to revisit reincarnation again.
Oh, yeah.
And so if we get a chance, let's go to that. Okay. And so
Okay.
so as you're being generous with a lady, because she's old, she's slow, you know, she can't move very fast. You're also developing the patience, the forbearance, the ability to stand there in line and not get all huffy and not get all, you know, turn around to the people in line and say, you know, I can't believe this store. I'm going to stop. You know, all the stuff that you see every day. So you just don't get engaged in that. And so that would be an example of forbearance, patience, temperance.
I also hear it when I've attended to or listened to some Dzogchen teachers, and they often stress, and I think Cleary might have in the Avatamsaka Sutra a bit, patience with practice.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, very good. Thank you, Lexo. That's a very good point, and thank you for reminding me of it. Yeah. So when you're frustrated, you know, I'll never get enlightened, or I'll never wake up, or you know, I can't meditate for 20 minutes. There's no way I can do that. And your mind's going nuts, da 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 da. Well, then you calm down, take a breath, say, okay, how can I practice uh, generosity and forbearance in this situation? Well, you have some. Yeah, it's hard at first, meditation. And probably you're doing it wrong too, so that doesn't help. And so then Yeah, so then you just take it a little bit easier on yourself. And you're going to need that because remember, some of the other paramitas are more active, like the energy and effort and focus. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So, all right, then the next ones are, and I think people mix these up. I definitely did when I was getting started, and I couldn't really understand the distinction effort and discipline, although those are two different paramitas.
Discipline takes effort. That'd be
Right.
one way to remember it. But discipline could also be, listen, I'm going to read the Avatam Saka 20 minutes a day for 4 months until I'm finished. Well, some days you might not feel like that. And some days it might be 11 o'clock at night and you just want to go to bed because you've been working all day. But depending on the student, they may say, well, I need to do this. I committed to this to myself. I'm going to do it. That's discipline, right? Discipline is not cheating on, you get to 104, mala recitations and you just say, oh, well, 104, that's plenty. That's lack of discipline. Discipline is involved in so many things. It's like whenever you're going to put a polish on something, whenever you want something to look shiny, if you, it's a form of discipline. Let's say you're a landscaper, and you're doing somebody's lawn, and there's a few little details here that could really make it shine, right? Well, it'd be generous of you, and it would take some discipline for you to put in the extra, 15 minutes to make the place look really, really spiffy. So a lot of these things are not that magical, mystical. They're just practical and very ultimately practical. And that's why, as a psychiatrist, I oftentimes wish that we had something that was as pro-social, pro-growth, a program that was not just against things, but for things that we could use with our kids. I think we need it. So next one.
Next one is insight, otherwise known as wisdom.
Ah, yes, insight and wisdom. One of the two wings. So insight is, well, as a general way of putting it, insight would reflect the your understanding. How deep is your understanding? How broad is your understanding? How profound is your understanding? So insight is a way to signal that there's, and the difference is that in these endeavors, especially in Buddhism, emptiness and insight are almost synonyms. They're not synonyms, but almost. So how much insight do you have into the empty nature of this cosmos? For example, how deeply are you aware that nothing that you see today will ever be around you? Well, once it's gone, and it won't be long, will never be seen again. Another example, if you're a scientist, are you aware that now that quantum mechanics has stepped into the experimental picture, we can't even really speak of matter per se. It appears much more like we're just in a cosmos of infinite light. So that would be another aspect of emptiness. Another aspect of emptiness would be the relativity of time. This was a great discovery of Einstein, one in which he put all the mathematics together so we could work with it, but it was very, very carefully, meticulously described, not only by the Buddhists in the 2nd century at the latest, but also by the Sufis and also by Muhammad in his night journey, where a pitcher falls off a table, and before the pitcher hits the ground, Muhammad has spent eons or epochs. I don't know what the word would be in Arabic. Wandering around in the heavens, and then he comes back to earth, and before the pitcher hits the ground, he's back into his body. So these kinds of things are so that would be the relativity of time. And then the impermanence of all things, and how nothing is made, nothing that we say exists on this earth can we say properly exists independently. Everything is interdependent. In reality, there's no separation, but for now, people can't see that. So you just say that there's no solidity to be found anywhere. Everything's in flux. Everything is made up of other things. And every other thing affects everything. It's like Netavendra writ large. And so insight's going to be the one that you could literally spend bookshelves on, right? Because that's a synonym for wisdom. And so I'll leave it there, but that's the general gist. And again, all these things can be cultivated, and that's the key. They can be cultivated. No one is asking to say, hey, we want you to be, as loving as Saint Teresa. There's no paramita called loving. There's no paramita called gratitude. And the fascinating thing is when you think about it long and hard enough, or just long enough, you realize that they chose these for a reason. Okay, next one.
The final one, the sixth, and there's a trifecta of words for this, which have slightly different meanings: meditation or contemplation, concentration.
Okay. Those all mean the same thing.
Okay.
And it's hard for folks because meditation does seem like it should point to something else. And you could argue that meditation, unlike concentration, might not have an object, but it generally has an object. It's usually the breath, for example. Or if you're turning the light around, you're trying to get to the source of things that exist. But contemplation, if you read a Sufi story and you think about it, that's contemplation. If you're just walking down the road and a thought occurs to you like, wow, why are these flowers brownish, but these are like bright red? Why would two flowers of different colors be on the same plant? So you would think about it, contemplate it. It's contemplating God's world, and so science, people don't understand this either. Science and mysticism are very closely related endeavors. We're both searching with our whole lives for the truth, right? And science, thank God, has made a little progress in the last 40 years. And so at least they can, they have a seat at the table if they're ever interested. And they will be eventually. I mean, I'm here. I mean, the only reason I'm here is because I was trying to get the best model of the mind I could find. And that's where it leads. And so I think there'll be more of that in the future. And I think these spaces, I think the new tech that we have offers enormous opportunity to all of us to do all kinds of new things, extraordinary things that we could have never done before. And so that's part of what this endeavor is about. Okay, so does that cover the 6 paramitas?
Yeah, that covers them.
Okay. Any questions from the what do they call it? The the nosebleed aisles? Wyatt's in the nosebleeds. Hi, Wyatt. He's there. I know he's doing fine, even if he's not going to say anything. Lexo, you're the host. Melissa's our co-host.
You mentioned briefly when you went over insight and wisdom, the 2 wings, and I'm wondering if you could speak about the 2 wings for a moment.
Oh, wonderful. Great question. Great question. These came up, interestingly enough, from my point of view, as a complete aside. And usually when I was in some kind of like Dharma trouble, gone too deep in one area, too shallow in another, lost my balance and gotten into some kind of self-perpetuating blind alley. So on 2 occasions it came up. Wisdom and compassion are the 2 wings for the Dharma. And I go, what? I didn't read that anywhere. And I mean, you wouldn't say that to some of my teachers, of course. That's what I thought to myself. And I thought, well, that's interesting because that's only 2. That's not 6. And so what it is that wisdom and compassion are the 2 wings, are the 2 facets of a comprehensively developed adult human being. So with regard to, let's do it simply, and then at some other time we can go into more deeply. But wisdom without compassion is worthless. I mean, you can have all the wisdom in the world, but if it made no difference to anybody else, probably you don't have real wisdom. But let's say, imagine that you did. If you did have real wisdom without compassion, well, that's great. Doesn't do anybody any good. Doesn't do you any good. Now, on the other hand, if you have compassion without insight, without wisdom, then you go do things like, you go and inoculate some country that is petrified of needles, and you inoculate them with something that has a side effect rate of, say, 40%. Well, that's not a very smart way to do that. Do you see what I'm saying? So you need wisdom and compassion, because compassion without wisdom is of no use either. So you need those two in order to keep yourself aloft and to keep flying through this. I think it's a bird metaphor for the journey, maybe. But you get the gift. These two are really, really important. Without these two, no one's enlightened. Nobody's even a candidate for enlightened. Doesn't matter whether they've woken up or not. Makes no difference whether they've woken up or not. But it's highly unlikely, because once they've woken up and you see the nature of the reality we're in, it's very hard to, it's impossible to unsee it. Okay.
Okay, I have a follow-up then that came to me as I was listening. Krishnamurti is a really popular spiritual teacher, and I don't know if he can be credited for this or a number of other teachers like Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. A lot of his teachings are like this, where they say there is no path. There's no path to truth.
Mm-hmm.
And they advocate against getting rid of habits. And then for me, when I was starting out, these guys really threw me for a loop when I also was introduced to the Paramitas and practices like this, because then I'm thinking, what do they mean there's no practice, there's no creed, there's no thing I can do to get
There's no
toward
path,
there?
there's no consciousness, it's the Heart Sutra. That's not a good way to start people out. Eventually you realize that, of course, if you are everything and everything is you, how could there be a path? The path is for the mind, not for the spirit.
Right.
The reason we use that metaphor of a path is because it's a journey, right? You take one step after another, and if you do it consistently, that's key, and you do it with a pure and sincere heart, at least as pure and sincere as you can muster, then what you do is you just keep walking. I have a feeling I may have missed the question. What was the details of it?
No, that makes sense. I think it's just good enough to mention that that's not a good place to start people off, because you can sense that there's truth in what they say, but then
correct, and this is the problem.
It really throws you for a loop.
Yes, and this is the problem, and this is why, everybody, you're welcome to do this all on your own. I did it pretty much on my own, but the thing is, it'll take you 5 times as long. But frankly, I think it's better than just wandering around from teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher for 20 or 30 years, like a lot of people do. But what they have is a neurotic problem. They don't have a spiritual problem, and so it's just a way of being more efficient. And this is the kind of place you want to get here as soon as you can, because it changes your life, permanently, forever. And it's one of the few things on this earth that you can say is unequivocally good. Period. Other questions?
Yeah, if anybody has any questions at any time, please jump in. I tried to give speaking.
Or they don't have to jump in. They could just raise their hand, and then you know that they have a question lined up.
Yeah, that too. Please, whatever.
So go ahead, Lexo.
So I have a bit of a compare and contrast question. We've spoken about this maybe a little bit, and then I also was reading Thomas Clary's Secret of the Golden Flower again, and he described Chan or Zen Buddhism as a sudden enlightenment tradition, which I guessed was in opposition to a gradual enlightenment tradition. And then you've also posted that Zen proverb, which is, or maybe not a proverb, but saying, first wake up, then find a teacher. Can you describe the difference between a sudden enlightenment tradition like this and the other traditions?
Yes, and it's a very important question. Let's just stick with Buddhism for now. There was an influential guy, what was his name? Huang Po, and a group of these hardcore Chan Buddhists who became Zenists, and they broke into 2 schools, the Rinzai and the, I'm blocking on the Soto schools of Zen in Korea. Now, both of those schools are, I can distinguish between those two schools, but let's not for now. What we're trying to do is to distinguish between the Zen method, which is sudden, immediate enlightenment, and the Tibetan or the Sufi or the Taoist. What we know about Taoist training methodologies, I've only got a couple of books on those, on how they actually train their masters. So I won't speak to that much, but basically, they're saying that the way I like to put it is, it doesn't matter whether you're walking in a mist or whether you're walking during a thunderstorm. You're going to get just as soaked both ways. In the Hinayana traditions of southern, of Bhutan, India, Hinayana, Vietnam, Southeast Asia, the enlightenment is not seen as so much a goal. It's seen as something highly desirable, but it's not a goal. And the same thing's true, by the way, of the Namo Amitabha schools of Buddhism that still practice in Marin and God knows where else they are in this country, and they're all over elsewhere. But at any rate, they don't see sudden enlightenment as a goal to be achieved. Now, all of the Zen people, that's the only reason to do it, right? Is to wake up. The Sufis have something similar, but it's not their goal. And in summary, what I have to say is that I guess I'm going to use the same metaphor. If you want to get soaked to your bones with rainwater, it doesn't matter whether you walk in a mist or in a downpour. You're going to get equally wet. However, the downpour, which is immediate saturation, does have some advantages, sufficient advantages to make it worth aiming for, and the preparation is the same, pretty much. If you're in a Mahayana tradition, or if you're in a real Sufi tradition, or if you're in an advanced and reasonably coherent Taoist tradition, then these are not at all unexpected. Does that help? Obviously, it can go on for a long time, because you imagine that these divisions took place over centuries, right? Between the northern and the southern schools of complete reality, for example.
Yeah, just for somebody who's a little more new to all of them, could you quickly describe which are more mist-like and which are more downpour-like?
Okay, so say, for example, you get involved in the Buddhist tradition. As a novice, they're going to teach you a lot of things. They're going to teach you a number of rituals. They're going to teach you about, by showing you how they do things, which is quite different than how we do it in the modern industrialized West. And they're also going to teach you how to do certain practices, and to how to work with a mala, how to chant, how to do a mandala, things like that. It's just part and parcel of their religion. Now, for them, they're not so much concerned with whether you wake up or how quickly you wake up. They're more concerned with how well are you coming along in your character, in your personality, in your temperament. How are you doing? Are you spending half your energy just fighting yourself in your mind? Do you spend a good portion of your time wondering about some problem that causes you mental distress? Things like this all get weeded out in that process. But I really cannot speak to how they treat sudden awakening. But I suspect that what they do is they act like, okay, well, just keep going. And there would be something to be said for that. So I really don't know about those in the kind of depth. I've really specialized in the Mahayana, the Tantrayana, the Sutrayana, and Sufism and Taoism. I'd have to, and of course the indigenous things. So I'm really not enough of an expert on the Hinayana, the lesser vehicle, which is not in any way derogatory. It just is for people who don't want to put in the same kind of work, as opposed to the Mahayana, which tends to be reserved for the very, very devout, the very, very smart, or both. I better stop there, because I get into areas that I don't know that much about.
this might be a good time to ask. Your approach is multidisciplinary. Could you explain quickly what that means?
Yes, I was thinking multidisciplinary, then I struggled with the word. Well, maybe you should say pluralistic. And then I remember that story where Idris Shah's trying to come up with a sign. I think it says "truth for sale," and then someone says, "No, you got to change that. That should say uh, quality truth for sale."
Oh yeah.
And then he changes it so many times that he forgets what the whole thing is and ends up going back to MindScience. Okay, so ask me again, please.
You've described, well, we've been talking about a lot of traditions here. You describe your approach as multidisciplinary. Could you explain that to us a little bit?
I should say that the approach that was given to me was multidisciplinary or pluralistic, and it's multidisciplinary along two axes. One axis is the religious and metaphysical one. In this endeavor, we're quite happy to examine the rituals, rites, reasons, rationales, and literature of any religion, and to compare notes, because there's a lot of overlap, and that's interesting, because the things that overlap are likely to be the active stuff, the real deal. So that's one aspect to it. The other way it's multidisciplinary is we're not just going to include spiritual studies, we're going to include, like the Dalai Lama taught us, mind science, neuroscience, cell biology, everything that relates, and it all relates, frankly. Physics, quantum mechanics. These are essential elements for the modern adult to have at least a Time magazine level of conversance with. And here I'm speaking of Einstein's special relativity and also of quantum mechanics. It should take no more than an hour on YouTube for each of those. And it's good to have that because it's good for your brain to learn something new and to have to learn how to think differently now that we know that the world is different than what we imagine. And so it's in that spirit that's done. It's hard with no visual cues, isn't it? It's hard for me. I'm a visual person.
Yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, once again, if anybody has any questions, please just raise your hand anytime. A lot of people are finding this work.
Thank you, Rabbit. Go ahead.
Oh, did Rabbit raise
She
her hand?
just gave a thumbs up, so I imagine that's good.
Oh, okay, good. I missed it. A lot of people are finding this work through very popular online teachers, which is a good thing, but also can attract people for the wrong reasons sometimes, like we spoke about. Some of these are Rupert Spira, Eckhart Tolle. I've seen other ones who are popular, like I think somebody's name is Muji or Mujuji or something like that.
I haven't reviewed his work. I can't speak to that, but I'll do that next.
Yeah, I've seen a couple videos, but not too much.
He strikes me, because he doesn't look the part, he strikes me as more likely to be legitimate.
Interesting.
Yeah, when you see these guys with the long beards and long hair and the white and the Indian robes and stuff, that's when you know, I better start getting suspicious. And there are some very prominent examples of that right now. And there are literally generations of kids enamored with this guy, and he hasn't even woken up, much less be enlightened. So, just beware.
Yeah. What are the limitations of these popular teachers and what they have online for serious students?
Well, there are some popular teachers that are legitimate, the real deal. And not only that, they're really good at it. Not only that, they write really well. And not only that, they're crystal clear about their particular project for the planet. And right now I'm thinking of Eckhart Tolle, and more power to him. I prescribe Eckhart Tolle all the time. I read Eckhart Tolle. I've read his books, I think, 3 times, which is a lot, saying that he's, for an American, not American, but an English modern writer of that ilk. It's probably better, isn't it better if I just discuss individual teachers that I think that are legitimate and ones I think should be shied away from, or is that what we're doing?
That's a better question. Please do that.
Well, let me see how I can do this. No, let me just give a couple of apocryphal stories for the record. When I was in Marin, just north of San Francisco, I lived there a while, right? And the San Francisco Zen Center was world renowned. And I remember seeing in the newspaper something about him getting picked up for having a concealed weapon underneath his Zen monk robes. At any rate, I was talking about this with one of my teachers or something like that. And he said, yeah, that's a problem in Zen centers, right? Because for obvious reasons, you can't tell what anybody's really thinking. And as long as they behave the way they're supposed to, uh, there's no way to know, especially if they're good at sitting still for a long period of time, which is kind of a silly practice from my point of view at the moment. So at any rate, later, I was reading a book called the Green, what's it called? It's the definitive book of Zen tales from the Soto tradition, I think. The Blue Cliff Record. That's it. And in this book, there was a really flattering introduction written by the abbot of the Zen Center. This is the Green Gulch, the one where they built the restaurant. Anyway, so I went to a few sessions with a guy, and I was talking with my teacher, and then it became very clear to me, and it was already very clear to him, that this guy was a total fraud. He's a psychopath, and he's the abbot. And I'm not proud of this, but my teacher said that, that I might want to go back and in front of 40 of his students, embarrass or somehow or another try to shut him down, or just let everybody know that their abbot, the one that they were worshiping, giving their money and lives to, the one that they were meditating next to every day, was a out and out psychopath. But he was. And so it's rare to see that anywhere else, unless you've got sex involved, in which case it's common to see everywhere else. And I don't want to overgeneralize, but I do want to offer those two as examples as ways that the Dharma can really hurt you if you don't do it the way, according to common sense and paying attention. But the dead giveaway for the guy at the Green Gulch was that he would interpret these koans. They were unintelligible, completely unintelligible, as were his interpretations. And then he would make these really cool hand gestures and arm gestures, and they worked. I mean, you could see the visual effects of those. So he was mesmerizing the congregation, is what he was doing. And so we could talk about that some other time, but that stuff happens, and it probably happens a lot. You see it also, by the way, mesmerization of congregations by evangelical pastors, So great topic to discuss some other time. Is there anything else on anybody's mind, or a follow-up to that? Lexo, did you have something, or Melissa?
No specific follow-up to that, but I do have other questions.
All right. Well, let's keep going then.
Okay. As much as possible, since it's difficult to put in terms, could we clarify non-doing? Because when I first woke up and was studying, this was a perplexing part to me. And then you see a lot of people online who, luckily for them, they have glimpses, or maybe they have woken up but don't have a teacher, and they kind of just go off on this spiel that, oh, everything is one and there's nothing to do, sit back and just practice non-doing or inactivity, or just let the world take you.
Yeah.
It's not very helpful. So
not very helpful, can actually harm some folks.
Yeah.
So by not doing, everything gets done. And so under slightly different circumstances, I'm willing to bet that I could get up from this desk, grab my car keys, get in my car, drive to the store, maybe pick something up, drive back, come and sit down here, and not remember one bit of the trip because my mind was somewhere else, right? Now that's a good way to get in a car accident or to forget where you're going and end up in the wrong spot. So I'm not recommending that. What I'm trying to point out is that so much of our life is not doing. So it's trivial. Like whenever you do something that doesn't involve your conscious mind, that's not doing, right? So if you're absent-minded, you're taking a shower, and before you know it, you've washed your whole body, and you're stepping out, and you just did not do that shower. But that's the trivial and the not very interesting version of it. The other version is when you're finally getting over the top of that, the highest, what's the thing that people pole vault over? What do they call that? The pole?
I forget.
The crossbar.
Yeah, the crossbar. So you're gonna beat the highest crossbar ever set. Or let's say you're gonna do a run on a snowboard, or you're in the middle of snowboard Olympic competition. I can promise you're not going to get anywhere by thinking in those endeavors. It's only by not doing that you can actually do that well. And we see this in every human art and science, that when you're totally immersed, when you're totally involved, when yourself drops out just for a few moments, good God, give me some peace, right? When that actually happens, then you can do anything that you have the skills for, right? Because your mind's no longer in the way. You don't need your I, and you don't need your ego, and you don't need yourself, and you don't need the approval of others, or you don't worry about the disapproval of others. You just want to get the thing done. And you do it, and you do it well, but you didn't have to think about it because you knew what you were doing. Does that make sense? As surfers that are trying to, you think surfers sit there and think, okay, well, here's this wave. It's 6 inches taller than the largest wave I've ever done, but mine is so beautiful, and the weather's so perfect. And I wonder if I should take this wave or not. But then when they decide to take the wave, then they're on the wave, and surfing is not doing. Now, if you started to do some tricks, you could do a few trips. You could hang 10, or you could go to the back of the board and pop it up. But those tricks are doing. Am I getting the gist across? It's a nuance of wording, because we don't have the right word. But is it coming across the flavor?
It is, but people commonly call it a flow state.
They call it flow state. They call it something. Yeah, that's since that Czechoslovakian guy with the M and 24 letters after it. What's his name? Mikhail Charvikov. Yeah, he wrote a book called Flow. That was in the last 50 years, I would guess. This flow that we're talking about was described way, 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 way before English was even first babbled. So, yeah, but it is called flow state. There's a lot of other words. Does anybody else have any other words for this, by the way? So we can put them in the document. Again,
They call them like peak experiences, I guess.
yeah,
I don't know.
peak experience, flow experience, a competitive, a dissociation state. You don't hit 3 shots by thinking about, oh, don't I look cool?
Yeah, athletes call it in the zone.
Yeah, in the zone. Yeah, there you go. All the same
Collapse
thing.
of the waves function.
Well, that's interesting. Once the wave function collapses, and it does that often, then you're in reality, and that's that. There's no more decisions to be made. It's done. All right. Lexo, did you have a follow-up, or is that enough on that one? Or
Don't have a follow-up for that one.
all right. Do you have another one by any chance, or are we?
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
this one you partly answered, because you said you don't have too many manuscripts from the Taoists, but I know that they have, after coming to an understanding of reality, they then, according to Thomas Cleary's Tao Te Ching, his notes on it, they went out and they made treatises for the more mundane aspects of life, whether military endeavors, law, medicine, and whatnot. Have you read any of these? Are these helpful for practitioners or students of the way?
Is this from the Avatamsaka, or where is this from? From the Golden Flowers scripture?
No. Thomas Cleary's Tao Te Ching.
Is this a section? So why don't you read that section out, and then
Okay.
let's comment on it.
Okay, I can go find it.
Oh, well, wait a minute. I have it down right here. Which verb is? Well, maybe you should.
Well, it's somewhere in the introduction. It's also not. It's like here. 1 sec. If anybody has any questions to buy the time, that would be helpful.
Or I could fill the airwaves with some of my preoccupations, the chief of which these days is the development of our children and the absolute neglect. I mean, I thought it was bad in the 80s, but this is horrific. I had a 7-year-old girl staying here for a while, and some of the cartoons are just pure ideological garbage. And so they're not even letting our children grow up normally without having this stuff piped in a conscious effort to make them less family oriented or less likely to be interested in men and things like that. And so that's a real problem for our culture, because what we're doing is we're trying to destroy the culture, which is what was done not just in Russia, but also in China. And we know how it ends. It ends with terrible things, because who wants to go to work? Who's going to go to work and plow the fields and then plant the crops and then water the crops and then harvest the crops and then put the crops in trucks and then drive the trucks? There's nobody that wants to do that. Okay, Lexo's back, I think. Good. All right, so I'll stop.
Yeah. Okay. So to get the full breadth of this, it's a couple paragraphs. I hope that's not too much. From Thomas Clary's introduction of the Tao Te Ching, his translation. While followers of Taoism thus branched out into many different fields of research and work, those interested primarily in the essential Tao continued to focus on perfecting the mastery of human nature and life in three critical areas: individual well-being, social harmony, and accelerated evolution of consciousness. These three bases were believed to form the foundation of overall human development, the guiding lights of the arts and sciences. Through generations of applying the Tao to these three basic domains of life, extraordinary accomplishments in the maintenance of physical vitality, fostering of sensitive and effective relations between people, and development of latent mental powers, blah, 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 came to be recognized as byproducts of working with the way.
Now, why couldn't I have said that? Okay. Whenever I read a real writer, just like so, combination of both extraordinary and then teaches me why I don't write. Okay, so what's the question out of that beautiful passage? Keep that around.
The question is, unless if I'm misinterpreting, if this is all study of the way and according with the way,
Mm-hmm.
then okay. But it seemed to me that, from my understanding, all treatises were written for military practices. Some of the Tao Te Ching stuff is applied, or Lao Tzu's excerpts are applied.
Well,
to
yeah, of course, because think about it.
More mundane, yeah.
They're going to serve they serve their contemporaries, the leaders above them, of course the people below them, but of course the people in the future. And so what's the issue with the militaries? Can you imagine a Buddhist general?
I don't know.
I couldn't when I was doing my mandalas, but I've 100,000 times I've visualized a Buddhist general, a precious general, they even call him, right? Yeah, so these people are all grown up, so they realize what can happen to a country or a culture, and that we in the northern hemisphere of this continent are extremely blessed. We've never had hordes of Mongols, overrunning us, or a bunch of crazy Japanese attacking us and burning everything up, or Germans, marching across our plains to get to us. And we haven't had carpet bombing of our cities the way we've done to so many cities in our history as Americans. So, I'm sorry. Let me get back to this. Can you help me get back to the question, Lexo?
No, I think that's good.
Because when I start thinking of like 250,000 young people dead, and we knew it was not necessary, it makes me sick all over again for my government and for humanity, of course. Okay, so listen, what if we spend the rest of the time just announcing the new website, Lexo?
Okay, yeah, sure.
And I want to also thank everybody, Rabbit, Carol, and Wyatt, and Leo, the listener, for dropping in. That's really sweet. Melissa, and thank you, Alexa, for hosting it. But let's talk about the website. Tell us about it.
Sure, yeah. So we're putting together a website for Dr. X and for practicing the way. We do a lot of Q&As with the doctor, either on Spaces or off of Spaces, and then To make them more publicly available, they'll be put up on the website with brief captions of everything that's gone over, so they're easy to search through what topics, what questions were asked. But then also in addition to that, we'll have the sound links to all of them so that they can be viewed in a longer format, and we chop them up into 2 to 10-minute clips so they're more easily digestible or downloadable for people who don't want to sift through an hour-long conversation. But both are very valuable. And then also we post a transcript in a Q&A format. If you've read any of Eckhart Tolle's stuff, or maybe some other spiritual teachers, they have like a quick question and then the full answer that's been given that's all cleaned up, because we use ums and ahs and things like that in the transcript. So everything will be really easy to digest. Some of Dr. X's older stuff is also on there for people who are interested in tonal connectedness or attunement or other.
Or are working with juvenile delinquents, or working with teenage pregnant folks, especially if they're disenfranchised. So there's a bunch of stuff on there.
Yes, so that'll be all of the Q&A stuff that's there as a resource, and some of the older work that's there as a resource. The website then will also link to and have embedded all of Dr. X's YouTube videos and things that we're going to post on there, so that you both have audio format and visual and text, whatever works well for the way you like to ingest this stuff. So it'll be a one-stop shop for really everything that we're doing here.
And I want to thank Lexo publicly for his idea, his initiative, his drive, and without him, none of this would be possible, because I just don't have the bandwidth anymore. So it's very, very, very much appreciated, Lexo. And so the deal is pretty soon you'll be able to click on a tweet and go to the actual text, or go to the YouTube, and that's where we're going to start out. And so I love it. I think it's great. I think we need it, and I'm looking forward to it. Again, I want to thank everybody for showing up. Is there anything else we need to cover, Lexo?
No, thanks everybody. I mean, I have miscellaneous questions left too, but if you want to keep going. But other than that, no, all good.
Well, give me a short one, just so we got 5 minutes.
Okay, sure. Let's see, what's a more... this was a contemplation theme that you gave me that I gave some time to, but I think you might have said maybe to bring it up as well, the difference between a belief and an opinion.
Oh, yeah, that comes up all the time. All right, what's the difference between belief and opinion? Wyatt? He's probably driving his truck and listening. Okay, so the difference between belief and opinion, I haven't been able to find one.
I couldn't either.
so here I am, and religious beliefs could also be called religious opinions, or scientific beliefs. I believe that the world started with a Big Bang. Oh, well, that's great. So you've got your opinion is that it started with a Big Bang. Got it. Okay. So I just thought that's a useful thing for people to know. That's when someone tells you they believe something, that's the same thing as them telling you, I have this opinion. And so it's in a small way, we're trying to chip away at some of the conditioning that's crippling us, all of us. It's holding us back. And so whenever you can see things like that, you should see them, note them. If there's somebody around that's receptive, you could teach one, and then you've learned it, right? And so that's kind of the way that goes. And then Lexo, I tell you what, let's do this. You had a recent experience with a Nasrudin teaching joke. Do you want to tell them a little bit? I mean, you don't have to tell them the joke, but you could tell them how it worked for you.
The Nasrudin jokes have, and tie it to belief and opinion, or just in general? Oh,
just in general.
Oh yeah, okay. So the Nasrudin jokes, I probably started reading them. I don't know, when did I start reading them? April maybe? March, April, May. I don't know, a few months ago. And at first it was a few chuckles, then a few like maybe metaphysical or mystical meanings appeared. Like when Nasrudin has a saying that's like, if I knew what 2 and 2 were, I would say 4. And that one threw me down, laughed, and that one threw me down a loophole. But still, it was more of just like contemplating or thinking about something.
Mhm.
Only recently, the past few weeks, I've experienced what Idris Shah has described as living a Nasrud or experiencing a Nasrudin tale, which is like instant recognition, whether apparent or not, of the way it mirrors actual life and something that's going on, or psychological processes that people are playing out in their lives. And then trying to recite them when appropriate, if appropriate. Otherwise, you kind of just, it lands flat, or, like you said, if you're a psychiatrist at a cocktail party, you don't want to go telling people their unconscious is splashing all over the walls, or else you probably won't be received very well. But it's been a very elucidating experience.
Yeah. The way I describe it, just for folks that aren't playing around with that, it's like putting a little harmless cherry bomb in your brain, and you never know when it's going to go off. But then when it goes off with confetti and champagne and all kinds of. It's a real party in your head. Melissa, there, no obligation here, but do you have any final questions? I know you're a little shy, but if you have any questions, we could round out with that, or I could just sign off.
Well, mine doesn't necessarily talk about any of that, though I have had the Nasrudin experience.
Oh, good.
Thankfully. So I was thinking about, you mentioned very briefly that how tech is going to sort of make a big turn and start to show us more of possibly consciousness, I guess. That wasn't your word at the time, but I'm imagining that is what you meant. I was looking at the Avatamsaka Sutra, and it says in the introduction, mind is like an artist depicting the worlds. If one knows that the action of mind makes all worlds, one sees Buddha and realizes the true nature of Buddha. And I guess my question is whether or not you think that...
Whoa. Before you do that, just read those last two sentences from the Avatamsaka separate from the rest. Just read them. I want everyone to hear them. I want to hear them too.
If one knows that the action of mind makes all worlds, one sees Buddha and realizes the true nature of Buddha.
Yes, that's Buddhism in one sentence.
Mm-hmm. So I was wondering if you felt that tech was going to have the ability to start to let more people understand that the mind is the artist.
Oh, it already has. Right here, we're talking and we're discussing our art and our science. And it's facilitated it quite a bit. But I have a feeling that's not exactly what you meant. But this has, obviously, I could not have accessed Sufi or Tibetan materials of the quality that I'm able to access them, tragically in translation, but nonetheless, enlightened translators. So that was not even possible, when I was in my 30s. Right? So yeah, technology is definitely going to enhance this. But do you want to know more about the AIs or something? I'm wondering.
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering if it isn't going to show itself as a projection of our mind in a way.
Well, yes, of course, it already does that, and unfortunately, some of the worst features of our mind. So those are the retarded AIs. Yeah, those are really big mistakes were made with those. They tried to make them politically correct, and now they're useless for anything. But what I'm referring to is the overall situation when people can't lie. And there's no privacy anymore. And we're getting closer to that, but we're not there yet. For example, an AI, you can't lie to an AI about whether you took money from the Romanians or not. You can't lie to the AI about whether you used to dress up like a little Girl Scout and go around to, I don't know, college sorority parties or fraternity houses looking for dates. I don't see, those are the kinds of things you just can't hide, right? So that's one thing. With regard to the hideous corruption that's just destroying the world, that's going to be a lot harder with an AI around. So honesty is a long ways towards truth. And so if we could just be honest with ourselves, we would be a lot further from delusion and a lot closer to truth. But honesty is not easy, especially with ourselves. And that's why the jihad, the struggle, the holy war, the big jihad, the real one, is the struggle against the self. And so I could go on that for hours. Melissa, that's a great question. But I got other commitments. And I want to, again, thank all of you, and especially Lexo, you and Melissa in particular. Thank you. It's nice to have the support. It's nice to see you, Wyatt and Rabbit. It's nice to have the support, but this thing's going to happen one way or the other. But before I croak, I want to get some of this stuff out there. All right? Because it was given to me. That's the least I can do. All right?
Long live Dr. X.
Thank you. Thank you, Wyatt. And I'll see you guys later. I'm going to sign out now.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
ciao.
Bye.
The end.